MagMongoSlade.
Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. Today we're going to be talking about WWE Champions mainstream exposure. So there's a two-pronged reason why I'm doing this video. One, I was on PW Insider and I saw a question that was asked to Dave Shearer. The question about to Dave Shearer made me go watch a Jim Cornette video that was on the same subject. So here was the question. It says, quote, recently I listened to Jim Cornette and Brian Last talk about a radio show listing the last 10 WWE champions to a non-wrestling fans to see if there was any mainstream name recognition. All right, just to pause for a moment to clear this up. A Pittsburgh radio show had 8 to 10 average people who weren't really wrestling fans and asked them to name the last 10 WWE champions. People were unable to do it. They were just kind of guessing, like The Rock, John Cena, etc. Okay. So to continue the question, it says, nobody knew Roman, Kofi, Drew, Big E, Daniel Bryan, or AJ Styles. They all forgot that Rock, quote, came back. They barely remember Orton, and they only remembered Miz and Lashley from their matches at WrestleMania 23 and 27. Yes, Lashley, to continue, was known for being with Donald Trump in the Battle of the Billionaires in 2007. So people didn't know who Miz and Lashley were. Now, that's sort of the setup. You know, people don't know who the last 10 WWE champions were. The question to Dave Shearer was, now I understand this is a result of WWE making the company the draw, not the wrestlers. But in your opinion, could WWE or AEW turn that around and make their wrestlers mainstream stars on the level of Steve Austin or The Rock? Or has the horse left the barn and pro wrestling will forever be a niche product going forward? So that's the question to Dave Shearer. Now, the reason why I'm doing this video is because there are two different answers here. There's Dave Shearer's answer, which I agree a lot with. Then there's the Jim Cornette and Brian Last answer. Now, the Jim Cornette, Brian Last answer to this is that this is the work of Vince McMahon making the brand the star rather than any individual wrestler, which is a good point. And of course, because they're stuck in the 80s, it was, well, back in the day, everybody knew their local wrestling star. It's like, I'm pretty sure everybody used to hang around in the general store and knew the name of, Patty's boyfriend too, and all that kind of stuff. There was a lot of things that were different in the world 50 or 60 years ago. To the point of Cornette and Brian Last, yes, a lot of wrestlers were local household names because you saw them more often. And to Dave Shearer's point, which we want to talk about in a minute, there were fewer television options. So I'm going to try to combine these two, the two responses. So Dave Shearer responds, I think one thing that too many people forget about when comparing the then versus now, it says TV ratings, for instance, 20 years ago, the options were limited. A show that did a 10 then would be canceled. Today, it would be a hit. Streaming hadn't started yet. Video games, you mostly played them at home or on your own machine. Now, people play online and people pay money on Twitch to watch other people play games. The point is that there are so many options now for everything, not just wrestling. I grew up as a kid with a roof antenna. We got ABC, NBC, and CBS. No Fox yet. We got 3 UHF channels. There were no video games or internet. Choices were minimal, which meant people watching TV at night pretty much picked from the 3 channels. Now, there are literally tens of thousands of things people can watch. Hell, Netflix might have 10,000 on its own. Today, most entertainment shows are niche products. It's the way things are now. WWE is at the top of these niche products, which I think is a very reasonable response. I think if you combine what Dave Shearer is talking about, For instance, there are not being a lot of television networks. Therefore, when you got on TV, you were essentially being watched by more people because there's only 3 channels for people to watch. This is the childhood of Jim Cornette too. They're older guys. I had a similar childhood. I think there was Fox when I was a kid, but if you grew up having to turn a dial to watch television, you are more likely to remember or things that you grew up with and people that you saw on television. You used to watch things that you probably wouldn't bother watching today because it was on television. Some things get memory hold. But when you were back in the day, especially in what Jim Cornette's talking about, these guys were local stars. They most likely did car commercials. They did local commercials. There were posters of them everywhere. You could go see them weekly on television. You could touch them. They would do interviews. They would be in the newspaper. If you were a TV star in your local community, it was like being the top quarterback in your high school. Everybody knows who you are, even if they're not, personally your friend. You know who the quarterback for your high school football team is, or who the high scoring point guard on your team is. Everybody in the school knew who those guys were. But when you sort of branch out and you go to college or whatever, unless you're a sports guy, you probably don't know who plays on these teams. So my response to this, to finally get to my own thoughts on this subject, is that it's not just Vince McMahon making the brand the star. It's not just television changing and now there's there's more options, therefore it kind of dilutes the pool. It is also the fact that everything, like Dave Shearer said, is niche. There used to be a time, I'm pretty sure some of my older people would know, where if you were a multi-platinum artist, pretty much everybody knew who you were. There were folks who used to be on TV all the time. There was MTV or BET constantly playing your video in a circle, so everybody saw your face. Everybody knew who you were. Now, I don't know who half the people on the radio are. I don't know what they look like, and I don't know what their names are. There was recently a song called Players. It's a pretty cool sample to the song. I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head. I think the artist, her name is Quayle Ray. And I heard this song over a year ago, and I kept hearing it. It was a TikTok thing, right? You used to see TikTok videos and it's like girls dancing to the Players song. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. This went on for a year before I finally saw what the artist looked like. I saw her at an NBA basketball game. She was performing at halftime. That was the first time I saw this girl. It had been over a year. Now, in 1998 or something like that, if I would have heard a song that much, I would have eventually come across the music video without even trying. Because if I watched MTV or BET or something like that, her face would have been on the screen routinely. There was a time where, if you were a multi-platinum artist, everybody knew who you were. If you were a movie star, everybody knew who you were. Now, we talked about on this channel before, I don't know how many weeks ago it was on a live stream, about Anthony Mackie coming out saying that there are no more movie stars. Nobody knows the actors anymore. People are now, because of the Marvel movies, the brand is now over the movie stars. People know Captain America. Captain America is the star of the movie, not the guy playing Captain America. Spider-Man is the star of the movie, not the guy playing Spider-Man. And so if you can do this, with pretty much anything. J.K. Rowling, let's put it like this. There was a time where people knew famous authors, right? J.K. Rowling is a famous author. She's famous for writing Harry Potter. How many people can really name a famous author anymore? How many people know what a famous author looks like and you've consumed the media, something that they've written. For instance, the author of the Hunger Games. Can you name the author of the Hunger Games off the top of your head? Probably not. That's what these people were asking the regular folks in Pittsburgh to do. Name the last 10 WWE champions. And they were like, oh, I don't know who those people are. It's like, of course you don't know. If you don't watch wrestling and you don't go out of your way to educate yourself on that subject, or if it's not something that you care about, of course you don't know. Who would know? I don't know. Yeah, I wouldn't know either. You could have stopped me. I mean, there's a couple of things that's a problem here. For starters, you know, if you were to put me on the spot and tell me to name the last 10 heavyweight champions in boxing, I have no idea. You know, I can guess some of them. You know, the one I've seen on TV recently, and maybe the guy he's beaten, and then maybe a couple of other guys. But I can't name. I'm not a boxing enthusiast. Same thing with UFC. If you were to stop me and say, who are the last 10 best artists from the Grammys? I'd have no idea. I have no earthly idea. Who's the last 10 people to win Best Actor at the Oscars? I have no earthly idea. The Oscars and the Grammys are watched by tens of millions of people on television. And if you stop the average person and ask them, name 10 people who were in the Oscars, who won Best Actor at the Oscars, they wouldn't have any idea. They wouldn't know. Because that's not something they care about. That's not something they would put any energy towards. So, the idea that WWE superstars are not mainstream anymore, you have to tackle this sort of subject with a two-pronged system. Nobody knows who Roman Reigns is, according to this radio show and their terrible social science, which I'll get into in a moment. But according to them, nobody knows who Roman Reigns is. All right, fine. So how is it then that WWE can put out a clip of Roman Reigns beating up Sami Zayn and it gets 20 million views throughout Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, etc.? Of course, this is a global thing, right? So you put something out and globally 20 million unique viewers have seen it. But maybe there's people in Pittsburgh who haven't seen it, don't know who these people are. You know, maybe there are people in Arizona or Wyoming who don't know who these people are. You know, 20 million viewers, well, there's 7 billion people on the earth. Right? So there's going to be people who don't know. You know, 20 million sounds like a lot, but there's 300 million people in the United States. 2 million of those 300 people watch SmackDown. That's a very small fraction of the American society. There's 300 million people in the United States, 25 million or something like that watch the Grammys. That's still a small fraction. It's a bigger fraction, obviously, but it's still a small fraction of the American society who knows or cared enough about the Grammys to even watch it. I'm not surprised, you know, that these guys are not known like local celebrities used to be known. It's not the same thing. They're not as known as movie stars used to be known. This is something that we've been discussing on this channel pretty often, but we've been talking about it because I always talk about things in broad strokes, that it also applies to movie stars. It applies to pretty much everything. There used to be a time where you print 1 million of a Spider-Man comic book and pretty much every child had one. You know, these things are not true anymore. The world has changed. People's consumption of media has changed. Who is a star in what realm? That definition has changed. Interestingly enough, we always decide that something should be like something that's sort of outlandish, right? Every movie star should try to be like, who is a movie star everybody would know? Clint Eastwood, right? Every movie star should be like Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's like, that's not reality. That's not how acting works. Most movie stars are never going to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. most movie stars are never going to be Sylvester Stallone. That's the reason why you can envision them in your mind, and it's easy to use them as examples. Not every wrestler is going to be Hulk Hogan. In fact, none of them are going to be Hulk Hogan. None of them are going to be Stone Cold Steve Austin. None of them are going to be The Rock. We have to stop using that as an example of what it means to be a star in this industry, as you being known, being able to get picked out of a lineup by hundreds of millions of people. Because as we've talked about on this channel before, it also applies to movie stars. It applies to actors. It applies to pretty much everything. Nobody is as famous as they used to be. Musicians are not as famous as they used to be. Actors are not as famous. Wrestlers are not as famous. That's just kind of the way things are. So it was an interesting subject to talk about, but the social science behind it is kind of slippery. It was more of a radio trivia thing, not exactly some kind of full-blown experiment, but it's interesting, you know, and I think people just can just take whatever they want to from it without actually learning anything about it. So thank you for your time. I will be waiting for feedback. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll talk to you guys later.